Hello, everybody. Today we will be speaking about the art and influence of Rodin, a naturalistic vision in 19th century Paris. This presentation is not intended to be a biography of the artist, but rather a deep dive into several of his works as we discuss their characteristics and the influences that informed them. 19th century France was full of political turmoil and conflict. However, at the same time, it was home to many revered artists and intellectuals of the day. You can count among them Rodin himself, as he was quite the thinker, and, although influenced by classical sculpture and classical works, Rodin chose to depart from these classical themes and embrace the more psychological and emotional aspects of his sculpture. Early in his career, Rodin often ran into resistance regarding the lack of presence of a clear theme in his works. Let's take, for example, his sculpture of St. John the Baptist from 1878. It is in the sculpture that he employed an Italian model who were common for the day. As he worked, he encouraged the models to walk around very naturally without giving traditional poses, as to capture something informal about the subject. In this particular instance, the model was the inspiration for the sculpture, not the other way around. Rodin had seen something in his subject that sparked his need to create, and then he came up with the theme after the fact. This shows that Rodin was more connected to and interested in capturing the psychological and emotional presence of the person in front of him. It was almost as if giving a title to the sculpture was a bothersome task. He could have chosen to name the sculpture almost anything just to fulfill the requirement, which Rodin had said of some of his other sculptures. Around the year 1885, Rodin was commissioned to begin work on what is arguably his most recognizable project, the Gates of Hell. What is already largely known about this project is that it was the physical manifestation of Dante's Inferno. Dante, as a literary figure himself, was used as the subject for the piece's capstone, The Thinker. Around the same time that this work was commissioned was the presence of many academics and intellectuals in Paris, to include the father of modern psychology, Freud. It was known that he was visiting between 1885 and 1886. Another academic whose work Rodin was acutely aware of was Jean-Martin Charcot. He was a neurologist that was known for diagnosing neurological disorders and had published a book of writings and illustrations on hysteria. Charcot had encouraged his students to document the visual aspects of affliction. Rodin had become aware of this documentation and used it as direct reference for many parts of the Gates of Hell. The published works on hysteria featured many illustrations by Charcot's assistant, Paul Richer. So again, as the Gates of Hell was intended to be a direct translation of Dante's Inferno, more to its core and to Rodin was the psychology of the time. Rodin captured the affliction of people and their anxieties in the sculptures that he created for this project, largely referenced off of Charcot's work. Another important figure of the time in France was the author and politician Victor Hugo. Some of his most recognizable works are The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Les Miserables. Rodin had to go to the author's residence in order to complete his studies for the portrait bust that he was to create. The tone of the household was somber, as Hugo's longtime mistress was dying of cancer. Hugo was up in years himself as well, and therefore could not sit for long poses for Rodin to capture sketches of him. Because of this, Rodin had to draw many opportunistic sketches. These were always drawn very quickly, and Hugo never posed for them. It is estimated that Rodin completed anywhere between 80 to 100 drawings. Through this extensive study, the artist managed to document the author's emotional state by showing the hardened gaze of a man in political exile. The portrait bust was completed within 3 months. Many years later, after Victor Hugo's death, the state had commissioned Rodin to create a memorial sculpture that was to be displayed in the Parthenon. Rodin's preliminary works and proposals were rejected by the subcommittee due to internal politics, but also because of Rodin's abandonment of classical ideals in his work. One of Rodin's later but very critical works was titled The Walking Man, attributed to approximately 1907. The Walking Man has many unconventional features, such as the pigeon-toed positioning of the feet. This caused a flex in the legs, which Rodin sought out in order to capture the details and texture of the muscles. Arguably, the most important feature of this sculpture is the notable absence of the arms and head of the figure. This causes the figure to be unidentifiable and non-specific to an individual person. It also calls into question the need for completeness in artwork. Unlike previous classical sculptors, such as Bernini, who would capture the climax of a moment or a gesture, Rodin's process now was a stripping away of the non-essential and to only include the necessary details in the artwork. He would revisit this process and approach again in his later works. This questioning is why many regard Rodin as the father of modern sculpture. Before, his emphasis on emotion and psychology was to bring the internal of the subject to the external so that it was visible on the artwork. Now, through this questioning and exploration, Rodin invites the viewer to join him in his internal dialogue in discovering what is art.